NetsBoy, so let's hear what he has to say. His name is NetsBoy, he thinks the world is all over when the Nets just can't play.
What up, Net fans? NetsBoy here, bring your latest in your Brooklyn Nets news. So, the Nets took care of business in Game 5 like I expected them to do. They beat the Celtics 123 to 109 in a game that I basically felt like I kind of nailed. Like, if you remember, I said like I kind of felt the game was going to be relatively close, but the Nets were going to pretty much be in control, but the Celtics would be lingering throughout the game. And then in the fourth quarter, the Nets will, take over the game and blow them out, or extend the lead, and then maybe in garbage time, the Celtics will come back and it'll only be like a double-digit game. Well, that's basically what happened. I mean, it ended up being a 14-point win for the Nets, but that's kind of what happened. Throughout the entire game, the Celtics were there. The Nets played really well in that game. A lot of good ball movement, as I've touched upon before, 26 assists, which, like I said, 25 assists or more seem to be the magic number for this Nets team. If the Nets have 25 or more assists a game, I feel like they could beat any team on any given night and win a majority of their games. But if they do under 25 assists, I feel like they could lose to anyone. But great ball movement. James Harden with a ridiculous triple-double, 34, 10, and 10. Durant had 24. Kyrie had 25. The big three did do most of the scoring. Joe Harris had 10, and Bruce Brown had 10, and then a few other points here and there from a few other guys. But that's okay. To me, it's not an issue if the big three are the guys that are scoring, as long as it's how they are scoring. And once again, that 25 assist number is the number I'm going to harp on. If there's tons of ball movement and the big threes are taking and making the shots and passing the ball, I'm all for it. I just don't like this, one-on-one offense that we see sometimes from the big three. So, I want to clarify that. I don't know if anyone really got confused, because I've talked about in the past how I don't like how when the big three score like 84 of a team's like 110 points, which like happened once. It's not necessarily that. It's how they get those points. Are they moving the ball and getting open shots, or are they going one-on-one? And so as long as they're moving the ball, I like it. And that's kind of what we saw in Game 5, was much more better ball movement. And like I said, give credit to the Celtics. They wouldn't give up. They were lingering, but in the fourth quarter, the Nets, throttled forward and kind of, hit the accelerator and took off and had, I believe, as much as a 19-point lead. And they just, from that point on, they kind of coasted through the fourth. And like I said, double-digit win, and the Nets move on. So that's great news. Now we got to talk about the next series for the Nets. So after a kind of an easy series against the Celtics, and I have to say kind of because they did lose Game 3, and there were some hard competitive games out there, but ultimately relatively easy series for the Nets. They now have to go and play what probably will be, in my opinion, the toughest series that they will have in the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, I talked about this before in previous NetsBoy episodes. To me, the biggest threat to the Nets is the Milwaukee Bucks. They just, to me, match up the best personnel-wise against the Nets. If there's any team that has the personnel to compete with the Nets, to me, it's the Bucks. Now, I know everyone thinks it's the 76ers because of Joel Embiid and that the Nets don't have an answer for him. But I've said this before, that part is true, but it's the other guys surrounded by Joel Embiid that I'm not buying into. I don't buy into Tobias Harris, even though he had a great first round against the Wizards and a great year in general. I don't buy into Ben Simmons on any given night, and the shooters that they have, I don't buy into them, and I kind of just feel like the Nets will be able to beat the 76ers. But this Bucks team, with Giannis Antetokounmpo, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis coming off the bench, right? Legitimate players like that, players who can knock down shots. This team is going to be a challenge. And I've also touched upon this before, but we saw this in the two games that the Nets lost to the Bucks. The defense that the Bucks have is probably the best matchup against the Nets. Drew Holiday, as great as Kyrie Irving is, can slow down Kyrie Irving. And that's the thing. Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, James Harden, you can't stop them, but you can slow them down and frustrate them. In those games that the Bucks won, Kyrie Irving had bad shooting nights. I think he was like 7 for 22 or something like that. Or like something, because Drew Holiday can slow down Kyrie Irving. And Giannis Antetokounmpo is probably the only defensive player that can guard Kevin Durant one-on-one with marginal success. We've seen it. We've seen Antetokounmpo block Durant. His Durant's so-called unguardable jump shot, we saw Antetokounmpo block him. And his length and athleticism is probably the closest thing to that of Kevin Durant's. So Antetokounmpo can match up well against Durant, and Drew Holiday can match up well against Kyrie. And then you look at James Harden, well, that's going to be the key to this series. That's the reality of it. I know everyone is going to talk about Durant against Giannis and Kyrie against Holiday. To me, the key to the Nets' success is James Harden. He is going to have to be the best player on the court. Because it's going to be tough for me to say this, but Durant and Kyrie need to defer to James throughout most of the series. Now, that doesn't mean they don't try to take their own shots and don't try to, move the ball and do what they need to do. It's just that if it ever comes down to needing a big shot and you get this one-on-one situation and you can't switch with a pick or something like that, I'd rather have James Harden in a one-on-one isolation than the other guys matchup-wise. Now, that once again, if players switch and you have like Bobby Portis on Kyrie Irving or Brook Lopez on Durant, like of course then give it to those guys. But I'm talking about straight up matchup to matchup, one-on-one, player on player. You most likely are going to see Giannis on Durant and Drew Holiday on Kyrie, and then I guess DiVincenzo maybe, or Pat Connaughton or Chris Middleton on James Harden. And I'd rather have James Harden in those matchups than the other guys. I just really would. So to me, the key to the Nets in this series is James Harden. But not the Houston Rockets James Harden, in which he's shooting a bunch of dumb shots. The Brooklyn Nets double-digit assists James Harden. As mentioned before and as talked about 100 times already between the last 3 episodes, the key also will be this ball movement of the Nets. Because of this one-on-one defensive personnel that the Bucks have, the iso ball crap will 100% fail against this Bucks team. It doesn't matter if one player makes a shot, if Kyrie makes a tough shot, if Durant makes a tough shot. If you rely on the my turn, your turn, his turn crap, the Nets will lose this series. 100%. Because the Bucks can guard one-on-one and make it very tough for those players to score 35 or 40 points on any night without shooting like 30 field goal attempts. And so that's the key. James Harden moving the ball and getting everyone else involved. I am telling you this right now. If the Nets win this series, it's going to be because they moved the ball and Joe Harris made some big shots and Blake Griffin had a big game and Jeff Green, who I believe is supposed to be back in time for game 1, but I'm not sure, has a good performance. And Nicholas Claxton plays well. And Bruce Brown and Landry Shamet hit some shots. When Tyler Johnson plays sporadically and makes some big shots. To me, the key for the Nets are the other guys in this series. And I'm a little nervous because I've touched upon it before. This series is going to be the first time that the Nets are going to be playing a team that I really do believe can match them on any given night. And I get nervous when I see this Nets team play. I get nervous when I see the team struggling, and then all of a sudden Kyrie Irving goes 1-on-4, or Kevin Durant just dribbles, and shoots a tough contested shot, or James Harden does a stupid between the legs 17 times step back 3 that's always short. Like, I don't like that, and it gets me nervous because I'm just so afraid it's what they're going to do. So scared. I'm so scared. I've never been so nervous for a playoff series ever. For a second-round matchup, I've never been so nervous. Because the reality is, the Nets still, to me, are the better team. And that the Nets should still win this series. It's just that there's a lot of pitfalls that are set up throughout this series that the Nets could fall into because of how dangerous the Bucks are. So I'm nervous. I really am. Maybe I will feel better after game one watching how the Nets will play and especially if the Nets win. And obviously the Nets having home court advantage is huge in this series, and I'm very relieved that they will have home court advantage, being the 2 seed. But I'm just nervous. And, you know, it's going to be a tough series. It's going to be a grinding series, and it's going to be frustrating. And we'll see what happens. That being said, I am going to predict the Nets will win the series in 7 games. And the reason why I'm doing that is mostly because of my fandom. And the fact that the Nets really should win the series. They're the better team, okay? If they move the ball, they are the superior team to everyone in the league. So I believe the Nets will win this series, but I'm making it 7 games because I already know there's going to be at least 1 loss, or if not 2, in which the Nets won't move the ball, like we saw in Game 3 against the Celtics. Like, they're going to do that at least once or twice in the series, and they will lose both those games. And then I expect the Bucks just to have one of those other nights where they just go off and have, like, a great game, and it'll be a high-scoring, like, 125 to 120 game. But I still believe the Nets should be able to win this series, so I will say Nets in 7, and they will win at home in Barclays Center because they had the 2 seed and they had home court advantage, which would make it worth it for the Nets winning at the end of this game, Durant playing those back-to-backs towards the end of the regular season, just to clinch the 2 seed. That is my prediction with this series, but anything can happen. And, you know, a little sidebar for both these teams, whoever loses this series, it's just going to look bad. Like, but not really, but like the Bucks and the Nets both can win the championship easily. Easily. But they both can't make it to the finals. And, you know, it's one of those weird things that one of the best teams in the league will be eliminated in the second round. Whoever loses the series will go home in the second round as one of the best teams in basketball because of how everything played out and the way that the East is very top-heavy. So it'll be interesting. Someone's going to be disappointed. Either going to be the Nets or the Bucks, and hopefully it'll be the Bucks. But anyway, let me know what you guys think about Game 5. If you know, not a lot. I don't really care too much about Game 5. It's over with. But, if you want to reflect on that. But let me know what you guys think about this Nets-Bucks series. If you agree with me that you're just as nervous, that if you're, believe that the personnel of the Bucks can maybe cause frustration for Kyrie Irving and Durant, and that the key is James Harden and the ball movement and the other guys. And then let me know if you agree with me that the Nets should win in 7 games. So keep your eyes open to the next NetsBoy episode, which will be, once again, probably around after Game 2. Which I'm not even sure when Game 2 is going to be. So far, the only game I saw on the schedule is Saturday for Game 1. And I don't even know if Game 2 was released yet. It might have been, but I didn't see that yet. But I know Saturday is Game 1. So keep your eyes open for that. And I'm just going to get ready, all right? Come on, Nets. Come on. Until next time, this is NetsBoy, signing off.